In the second week of November 2025, a motion-triggered camera bolted to a mesquite trunk in the Sky Islands south of Tucson recorded a male jaguar walking down to a limestone water tank at 2:14 in the morning. The infrared flash caught him for less than 4 seconds. Head low, ears rotated forward, moving with none of the caution a first-time visitor to unfamiliar terrain usually shows. Researchers at the University of Arizona's Wildcat Center pulled the file the next morning, ran the rosette pattern on his left shoulder against 15 years of spot pattern records held in the regional database, and confirmed he'd something no one on the team wanted to say too loudly in a press release. This was not a new animal wandering in from Sonora looking for open ground. This was the 5th individually documented jaguar in the modern Arizona record, cataloged that week as Cinco, and he kept coming back. Over the following 10 nights, the same cat returned to the same tank 4 more times, always after midnight, always descending from the same ridgeline to the northwest. Then, on the 11th night, he did something the researchers had not expected. First photographed in the Baboquivari Mountains in 1996 by a hunter's trail camera, and still alive, still resident, still cycling through the same Tumacacori and Baboquivari drainages 13 years later, when state subcontractors working under an Arizona Game and Fish Department research permit caught him in a snare originally justified as targeting mountain lions. In February 2009, he went into acute renal failure used for a large solitary carnivore. El Jefe picked up almost exactly where Macho B left off, and the overlap in timing is not coincidence the agencies have ever been eager to highlight. First recorded in the Santa Rita Mountains in 2011, he held a documented home range of roughly 20 square miles just south of Tucson until Mexican field biologists photographed him alive and apparently healthy in Sonora in 2022 and again in 2023. 11 comparative scat and hair sampling coordinated through the Northern Jaguar Project. DNA sampling pulled from the same water tanks the cats were already filmed. Rosemont Copper Project, a proposed open-pit mine footprint sitting inside the same Santa Rita project, fought and refiled in federal court for more than a decade specifically because its permit boundary overlaps. Documented, camera-verified jaguar range. There is also the comparative data almost nobody puts next to the Arizona numbers, which is the actual population baseline across the border in Sonora. Field surveys coordinated by the Northern Jaguar Project across the reserve system south of the line have documented a stable resident breeding population numbering somewhere in the low hundreds, complete with confirmed females, cubs, and multi-generational territories, all within roughly 130 miles of the ranges Cinco was just filmed walking. That population is not shrinking. It is, by most published survey estimates from the last decade, holding steady or expanding modestly under Mexican protections that have existed in some form since the 1980s. The biological question was therefore never whether jaguars as a species were disappearing from North America. It was, and remains, whether the northern quarter of their historic range, the part inside the United States, still functions as a usable extension of a healthy population next door, or whether it has been administratively and now physically sealed off from it. The obvious objection deserves to be said plainly, because it is the argument every wildlife biologist working outside advocacy circles will raise first. There is no confirmed female jaguar in the United States since 1963. Without females, there is no breeding population, no cubs, no self-sustaining group of animals that could be called a resident Arizona population in any demographic sense. 4 or 5 individually named males photographed across 3 decades is not a population recovering. It is a trickle of lone animals, and calling a trickle a homecoming risks overselling what the data actually shows. That skepticism is fair, and on the narrow demographic question, it is correct. Arizona does not have a breeding jaguar population. It has not had a confirmed female since one was shot near the Mogollon Rim in 1963. and pretending otherwise or overselling a lone traveling tomcat as evidence of a comeback does the underlying science no favors and hands critics an easy target. But the demographic argument and the habitat argument are answering two different questions, and conflating them is exactly how the corridor gets erased in committee rooms where nobody has seen the camera footage. Nobody serious studying this is claiming Arizona currently sustains a self-reproducing group of jaguars. The claim the site fidelity data actually supports is narrower, and for policy purposes, considerably more consequential. Individual males are repeatedly using the same specific mountain ranges and water sources across years and even decades, which means the physical corridor connecting the stable Sonoran breeding population, roughly 130 miles south to historic United States range, is still functionally alive, still being walked right now by an animal whose predecessors used the identical route in 1996, in 2011, and in 2016. A corridor does not require a resident breeding population inside it to matter. It requires only that it stay passable, because if a female jaguar in Sonora ever does move north, as happened as recently as the mid-20th century, when confirmed jaguar range extended north through the Mogollon Rim toward the Grand Canyon, she will need exactly the route Cinco just retraced, canyon by canyon, water source by water source. The argument for protecting these mountains was never that Arizona is full of jaguars today. It is that the door has to stay open for the one animal that hasn't walked through it yet, and every acre of that door reclassified as non-critical, every mile of continuous wall panel raised across the San Rafael Valley closes it a little further before she ever gets the chance to try. Which is what makes November and December of 2025 the moment this stopped being a slow bureaucratic argument playing out in comment letters and became a countdown measured in linear feet of steel. Using authority under Section 102 of the Real ID Act, a provision written to let the government bypass ordinary judicial review for border infrastructure projects, the administration waived dozens of environmental statutes in one motion, including protections tied to the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Endangered Species Act itself, to accelerate construction through exactly the ranges the 15-year monitoring record identifies as active jaguar corridor: the San Rafael Valley, the Pajarita Range, the Huachucas, the Pelonchillos, the same short list of canyons, Cinco, El Jefe, Macho B, and Sombra, all independently converged on across 4 separate decades. In place of the older, low vehicle barrier fencing that mountain lions, black bears, and the occasional wandering jaguar could still work around, given enough time and the right terrain, crews began driving continuous 30-foot solid steel bollard walls into bedrock, engineered specifically so that nothing that walks on 4 legs, regardless of size or jumping ability, can get over, under, or through. Paired with that steel came industrial floodlighting run the full length of newly walled sections. Banks of LED, towers bright enough to be visible from aircraft, erasing the darkness a nocturnal ambush predator depends on to move, hunt, and cross open ground undetected at all. Sombra, the jaguar photographed moving through the Dos Cabezas and Huachuca ranges between 2016 and 2018, stopped appearing on any camera in the network almost exactly as that stretch of wall went up nearby, and has not been documented anywhere on either side of the line since. So return to that ridgeline above the limestone tank. The second week of November 2025, the infrared flash catching a jaguar named Cinco, walking the same 10-day loop 3 other cats walked before him across 3 separate decades, down to the same drainage, the same hour past midnight, the same unhurried confidence of an animal that knows exactly where the water is. It was never a lost animal wandering into borrowed country looking for a way home. It was the last working length of a route that once connected a stable breeding population in Sonora to a historic range stretching north toward the Grand Canyon. a route still being used, still being remembered by whatever mechanism passes knowledge like that down through a solitary species, right up until the year the lights went up and the steel went into the ground beside it. Whether that route stays open past 2026 is no longer a question wildlife biology gets to answer on its own. It is a question of how many more miles of wall get finished, and how much darkness gets erased, before anyone with the authority to stop it decides the corridor was ever worth keeping open in the first place. Right now, tonight, somewhere along that same ridge, the cameras are still running, still waiting to see whether he comes back a sixth time, or whether the loop he has walked for 10 years finally runs out of road.